Good afternoon. Thanks so much for the opportunity to present this research we have been doing for the last 2 years. It's great to share it with you. We are very passionate about this research, and hopefully it's going to actually provide you with a tool with really what we are now discussing, which is the solution. Obviously, we all know about the challenges. We heard very much about the challenges, but we need now to work on the solution. And hopefully this research will help us in that direction. So just very quickly, the history of this research. We, as economists, we are very passionate about sustainability. At the Economist Intelligence Unit, which is the sister of the Economist, we are very passionate about sustainability and about data. We are data geeks. We like data. We like measuring. Not just measuring per se, it's really measuring to be able to change, because as we know, you cannot really change things if you cannot measure them in the beginning. So this was the perfect opportunity to make a difference. We met with the Barilla Foundation for Food and Nutrition in 2015, and we started this research program together. It's really just at a glance, what we are trying to do is investigating the challenges facing the global food systems. I'm not going to speak much about that because we have discussed them yesterday and today very much, but obviously, as we know, unprecedented challenges in terms of population growth, 8.1 billion by 2025, growth mainly in 90% of population growth in developing countries, which in itself poses a number of challenges. Limited land, difficult choices in terms of what do we use the land for. Is it for food? Is it for animal feed? Is it for fuel? And also, more in general, the challenges, the kind of twin challenge between underweight and obesity, many times in the same country and many times in the developing world as well, with what we say premature rates of obesity. So what we're trying to do with our research is really trying to establish a rigorous and unique framework to assess what are the main drivers and elements to be considered when we look at a food system which is sustainable. So the main outcome, and probably the most interesting, is the Food Sustainability Index, which is a framework. And as you know, indexes, I think it's always important to remember what indexes are for. Of course, they're very good to kind of focus attention and get lots of media coverage. But in reality, what indexes are good for, it's really trying to track progress towards some goals, and also trying to identify best practices, because obviously when we are comparing ourselves with other countries, we can see where we are doing better and where we are doing worse in other countries, and we can then look at the areas in which we are not so good and look at the areas in which other countries are much better and kind of learn from them. So it's really about, is a tool, an index is a tool, is a simplification of the reality, and is a way to provide tool for people and policymakers, but also us, the civil society, to really make a change. What we did here, I'm not going to, obviously in 5 minutes, I don't have the opportunity to go in depth into the index, and I suspect it's not the right time, it's too close, near to lunch. But basically, the Food Sustainability Index, we are examining 3 key areas of sustainability of food system. We are using the framework of the Milan Protocol, and obviously the SDGs, which, as we know, food, as we have heard many times, food is very much linked and very much at the heart of at least 6 of the 17 SDG, if not all of them in a loose sense. So we are looking at 3 different areas. We are looking at nutrition, so the existence of healthy diet, whether people are eating enough micronutrients, what are the percentage of people underweight or overweight, all these kind of variables. We are looking at sustainable agriculture practices. Obviously, we know that some of the challenges related to growing population are really with respect to how we use the land. Are we challenges related to deforestation, to ground pollution, and also to CO2 emissions? So it's really about looking at the ecosystem for food, looking at what are the challenges there, so looking at what are the challenges and what are the solutions. So solutions, of course, have to do as well with technology, new innovation in terms of producing more with less, and producing more in a more environmentally friendly way, but also has to do sometimes, and we heard yesterday in some of the panel, this going back to the old practices, to the tradition, to what indigenous community in many cases use, so kind of sharing the knowledge and not necessarily have to really be super high tech if one doesn't have the resources for that. And then obviously food loss and waste, which is a big component of what we discussed on those days. Food loss, something that takes place more in developing countries and has to do really with the beginning of the supply chain. So it has to do with infrastructure, with storage, and also with vulnerability to environmental shock, for instance, and waste, which is at the end of the supply chain, and it's really something which has to do more with us, I guess, at the end of the day, and with consumers as well, but as well with the overall society. So in terms of geographical coverage, we are, this last year, which was the first iteration of the index, we were covering 25 countries. So we took the G7, the G20, plus a number of countries for geographical representation, and also which were interesting for our experiment. So we look at Colombia in Latin America, we look at Egypt, Ethiopia, Israel, Nigeria, and the United Arab Emirates. Those countries, by all means, they're not the totality of the world, but they represent something like 85% of global GDP and 2/3 of the global population. This year we are looking at including new countries, and obviously this is a work in progress, so hopefully we'll have more countries this year, including the Nordics. So stay tuned for the launch, which is going to be in December in Italy. So in terms of index framework, as I said, we are actually looking at 58 variables, so it's a quite rich index. We are some of the variables, and I think that's actually the value as well of our ability in creating data and indexes. The fact that we are not only collating indexes or indicators coming from other organizations, but we are actually creating new indicators. So we have a network of analysts and experts based in every country in the world. So what we did, we create lots of indicators where there was no indicators, in particular with respect to policy responses or policy vision. So as I said, I mean, I'm not going to go really through details, but basically food loss and end user waste. We have a number of variables there trying to look at the two components of the equation. We have the sustainable agriculture chapter, which is more about water, so use of water, sustainable use of water, land use, and also air. Land use is something which has to do also not just with biodiversity and human capital, but also with, as I said, innovation and resources you put in innovation, but also with property rights, because in developing countries sometimes it's really the issue is really at the basis, at the institutional level. How do we create a framework in which small farmer can actually feel entitled to invest and to make an investment on the future? So we actually the property rights are very important in that respect. And then the last pillar is all about life quality, life expectancies, and diet. And good, I am on overtime already. Never mind. So very quickly, you have the ranking there. I've also have the link on the index, so you can go. Everything is available. But what I wanted to highlight is quite interesting, because if you look at the top performer, which is France, and you look at the score, our score are normalized on a basis to 0 to 100. You see that even the best performance, France, is still quite behind in terms of doesn't really come close to a full score. And these actually highlight the challenges, the complex challenges of really ensuring a sustainable food system. There are so many different variables we have to look and to get right at the same time. So it's quite hard. I mean, if I take the case of France is actually is probably in the sample we have looked, the country which has the most holistic vision from the government part in terms of food sustainability. So there is compulsory donation from supermarket to food bank and charity with respect to food which is not used. There is a campaign at the education level on how to do that. Labeling, compulsory rules on the labeling. There is actually even a minister in France looking at agro-food. So this is actually the best country in terms of vision. But then if you look at some of indicators, food waste is still quite high, even if you know that a lot has been done to reduce it. There are still quite high number of people who goes to fast food, not so healthy fast food. There is still quite a high water footprint. Another little things. The same with the laggard. There is always areas in which they are doing better. So I think the importance and interest of an index, it's looking at actually finding the stories behind the number and say, okay, where are the best practices? Where can we learn? What can we learn from different countries which are probably at the same level of development? The last minute, since I'm already over time, it's about the city monitor. So we did also started. This is a pilot study. So basically, we have heard earlier on this fact that actually cities are becoming more and more focal point of development, but also in the food sustainability equation. As we know, by 2050, 70% of the world population is going to be living in cities. Cities are hubs of activity, but also are places where sometimes there is not enough. They're actually a hub for unhealthy lifestyle. You know, people don't move. Maybe there are safety concerns, so people don't really go out, eat. Not as, don't have access to fresh vegetables and fruits. So it's very important to look at the city level. So this is, as I said, is a pilot. We are looking at 16 cities which we have identified based on data availability and urban food policy responses and implementation. And we are looking at a number of indicators. So we're looking, for instance, sustainable urban farming initiatives, enabling policies, obesity rates, availability of green spaces. This is not an index. It's just, as we call it a monitor because we didn't want to create. It's not the rigor of an index, but it's something which is useful, and you can find everything in the website. So please, I hope it's going to be helpful in your work and in our work going forward. Thank you.